And welcome back, everybody, to the Paranormal Operator Podcast. I'm your host, Operator 23, Adam, here. And we have another very interesting interview with Miss Haley. She was on our last episode talking about Bigfoot. She's got some more stories for you today. And on the note of today, it is, in fact, Mother's Day. So happy Mother's Day to all the ladies out there. And I'm hoping to get this uploaded this evening, but I have some weather coming in, so it really kind of depends on if Mother Nature is going to let me upload on this Mother's Day. So, with nothing left to do, Haley, if you want to go ahead and start wherever you want to start. Are these stories you're going to tell us, are these with the Sasquatch Outfitters as well?
No, this is actually just stories throughout my life.
Okay. All right. Well, take it away.
Um, Thank you. Well, I guess like the first thing that I can kind of remember is when I was little, maybe like one or two, we would have a friend that would come over to visit us, and from what I've heard, I always loved when she came over to visit. But one day she had passed away, and though there would be times um, that my mom told me that I would sort of act like I was seeing her. Like I I don't really remember seeing her, but she believed that those were times when her friend came back to visit. Um,
Oh, so is
I
this your friend or your mom's friend?
My mom's friend, but I was like
Okay.
one or two.
Hmm.
Um, I believe kids can be more perceptive with things like that. So, um, but that area that we lived in at the time was always really creepy. It was out in the middle of the country, and hardly anyone would ever pass by. But we had a few acres where my mom, my grandma, and my aunt lived in separate houses. And my cousins would always, well, my cousin, she would always get night terrors that would wake her up from her crib, and she'd be screaming. And she would always say that she would see this woman in like a white dress. Um, and she was on her mom's bed one time, and she started screaming, and my aunt ran in there, and she's like, "What's wrong?" She said that she saw um, a ghost, a lady laying in her spot in the bed. And she's like, "Well, what does she look like?" She's just like, "She kind of looks like you." And but in that same house, uh, when I was really little, I would also like see shadow figures like out of the corner of my eye, and so did um, my aunt and cousins at certain times. Um, but there was one time when I was, I don't know, maybe about 7 or 8. Uh, I had not only seen one out of the corner of my eye, but I saw one like standing, like
Hmm.
face to, not really face to face, but
Head on.
yeah, yeah, and it was like darker than dark. It just
Hmm.
sort of stood out from the darkness, and it just kind of walked towards me a bit and disappeared. Um,
Okay.
yeah, it was a little unnerving.
Now, is this your childhood home that you kind of grew up in, or?
Well, right in that same little area, my mom had a house on one of the acres, and then like this 3 acres was like right beside each other.
Hmm.
And so I had time living in my mom's house, my aunt's house, and my grandma's house.
Okay. It's funny because where I live is actually my mom's house, my mom's sister, so my aunt, and then my grandma. We all lived right next door to each other.
Yeah. Well, that's kind
Okay.
of like how it was with us, for the longest time. Um,
Mhm.
and I remember when I was around 8 or 9, me and my grandma were sitting in the living room, just watching TV. It was already dark outside. Um, and all of a sudden, the front doorknob started to wiggle, like someone was trying to
Hmm.
get in.
Mhm.
And I ran and hid beside the couch, but she was going towards the door and she was going to try to open the door. I don't know why. But I was telling her not to open it, but she did anyways. And but no one was there, and the screen was still shut. And I knew for a fact that I locked it because it was always creepy out there. I made sure the screen was locked. Um, but she told me it must have just been, the cats trying to paw at the doorknob or something. But I'm like, how if the screen was locked, if it was shut and locked?
Mhm.
And
Mhm.
it is a creaky door too, so we would have heard it open before anyone could get to the front door.
Yeah. Hmm.
Uh,
Okay.
and one time I was at school and we were doing like a little Easter egg hunt, and I thought that I was going to be clever, and I was like, oh, maybe they hid some in the dirt over here. And so I went over there and I was digging in the dirt and for trying to find Easter eggs. But then right where I was digging, I found a coin. And I went home and I showed my cousin the coin. We were sitting on the front porch, and I ended up dropping it, and it went through the cracks. And we all know anything that falls through that front porch is there. It's never coming out because you're
Yeah.
not gonna crawl under there and get it. But within like a few days later, uh, I found it under the TV stand. Don't know how I
Hmm.
got there, but I still have it to this day. I guess
What kind of coin is it?
I can't really make anything of it, but it's just it was a silver coin and it had like a dove on it.
A dove.
Yeah.
Huh. Well, not. It's not any American currency that I know of.
Mhm.
Is it like? Is it silver or?
Yeah, it looks silver to me.
Okay. Well, that's odd. I mean, well, not just the coin being odd, but also obviously the fact that it like teleported from underneath your porch.
Yeah,
Your so where did you say you found it? Was it actually at a church or was it
yeah,
at just okay?
yeah. I found it at the church, and I don't know. I guess I was just meant to keep it.
Mm-hmm. And do you remember how old that you might have been when that happened?
I think I was around um maybe 7 or 8.
All right. And were you living in the same place as before?
Yeah.
All right.
Um, then we ended up moving to a different house out in the country when I was about 10. I never really saw anything there, but a lot of weird things would happen, um, specifically in my room. But
Mhm.
like I had a stop sign that would light up if you hit it,
Mhm.
and that would go off at random times without me bothering it, and I ended up just putting it away. I also had like this creepy porcelain doll. I don't know why I had it, but it had a music box on the back of it that you could twist the knob and it would play music.
Mhm.
It was really creepy, so I kept it in the closet. Um, and there was a time when I hadn't messed with it in months and months and months, and I was just sitting there, and all of a sudden it started playing by itself from inside the closet.
Yeah, I bet that would be creepy.
Yeah, and it did that on maybe 2 occasions, and so I mean, let's just say I slept on the couch more than in my bed. Um,
Okay.
I mean, that room was just really creepy to me. But it had also had the attic entrance as well.
Hmm. Well, that's kind of different for for a room to have an attic entrance. It's usually like in the hallway.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it had the attic entrance, but I was never brave enough to stick my head up in there. So,
Mm-hmm.
but we would also be able to hear in the other bedroom like a radio playing, and the sound, it sounded like it was coming from the corner of the ceiling, and it was just really strange because I never knew what ended up causing that. We often thought that maybe like it was the tin roof picking up a signal or something, but I never heard
Hmm.
anything like that happening before. And you could only hear it at night.
Mm-hmm.
Me and my grandma could hear it almost every night, like right in that same corner of the ceiling. And like it was just picking up a radio signal. It was just weird.
That is odd. I'll have to look into that. I can't say I've ever heard of that. I have heard, and this isn't true. But there was a story about a guy who like back during World War II, he thought he was picking up Morse code in his fillings in his teeth,
Hmm.
and I can't remember what caused it. But
Yeah.
for some reason, I want to remember. I have a memory that actually it wasn't Morse code, but it was some kind of. I think it was a chemical reaction. So there was like a clicking, poppy kind of noise that he was hearing, and he thought that that was Morse code. And since we were like, during the war, he thought it might have been something, military related.
Yeah.
But I can't say we ever heard of a tin roof. I mean, an antenna is just a wire, really.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Well, I mean, I had never heard anything about, you know, something like that happening. I just found it really odd. Not really sure
Mhm.
what it was, but
Now, is this all in the same county?
yeah.
Okay. So when
um,
so when you moved, you moved to a house in the same county then.
yeah, it was about 7 miles closer to town than the last one, but it was still sort of in the country.
Okay.
But that at that same house, I'd had like a little metal detector that I'd gotten, and I was just going over the yard and everything. And I was using it on the side of the house, um, and I ended up picking up on something. And so, I dug a little hole, and I found a little thin wire. And I scanned the hole, and I mean nothing else was there. So you'd think, that's what I was picking up, but something told me to like keep digging. So I kept digging down further and further, and I ended up getting to this really thick root. Is like about the size of my forearm, um, and I just dug around that too. And further down, a little bit further down than that, I found an arrowhead.
Okay.
And this house was right by the river, and I've heard
Mhm.
how Native Americans like to set up their homes kind of by the river.
Mhm.
Um, but I just found it weird to me that if I hadn't kept digging, I would have never found that.
Yeah,
Especially
definitely.
since it wasn't picking up on my metal detector. But
And
I'll
the
still
the
have
arrowhead
that.
was a and the arrowhead was stone, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
but yeah, I
So
also still have that.
that's pretty cool. The
Yeah.
reason I asked if it was stone is because I know the Hudson Bay Company at one point they actually did trade metal arrowheads.
Mhm.
So that's why I was asking. Well, that's pretty cool.
Yeah, it looks stone to me. Um, but that's about all that happened at that house. But after that, we had moved to an apartment, and I was about 19 at the time, and I was really excited because it was going to be a change from living out in the country. Um, we were going to be kind of like in a downtown apartment. Um, but soon after we got there, all the neighbors were telling us that the whole apartment building was haunted. And I'm like, oh great, not again.
Okay.
um, people would hear footsteps and music, and just felt like they'd be were being watched and stuff. Um,
Mhm.
but I honestly really liked the place and the people in it and everything. I felt very safe. I guess because a lot of people were living there.
Mhm.
Um, but this place had like a ballroom, and it's like a big room where everyone could meet or eat and socialize or watch TV or play the piano or something. Um,
Mhm.
and I remember I was just kind of exploring the halls one day by the ballroom, and I started hearing someone playing the piano, and I thought it sounded pretty, and I wanted to see who was playing. So I walked over there closer to the ballroom and opened the door, and the lights were off, and no one was in there. Um,
Mhm.
and I told someone about it, and they said, "Oh yeah, that happens a lot." uh,
Okay.
so apparently, there's a ghost there that likes to play the piano.
So did this uh the complex or the was it like one building?
Yeah, it's like one building, but it's in a downtown area. Um,
Mhm.
I won't really say exactly where it's at, but
Yeah.
um, the downtown area uh, was flooded a long time ago, and so they had built it up.
Mhm.
So the whole bottom part of uh, that main street, uh, there's like storefronts down there,
Mhm.
um, and there's a lot of places in the building that you could technically go down in there, but a lot of it's restricted or blocked off. um, it's a really old building, like from the 1800s at least.
Mhm.
And yeah, there's like it was pretty cool actually. There's like a unused main entrance where the old lobby used to be. Um, and the only thing stopping me was that there was cameras, and they said, if you go past a certain point, you could be evicted. And I didn't want any of that, but man, did I really want to go down there and check it out.
Oh yeah, yeah, I understand.
Um, but yeah, they used to show it in underground, like the underground tours. Like
Mm.
they used to have haunted tours. Uh,
Okay.
and but that was when they did that before I started living there and knew about it. Um, but yeah,
Okay. So it was an old building, and at some point in its past, it had flooded.
like
So,
yeah, the whole downtown area.
all right. So that would have been, caused renovations, and then, when they came up with electricity, I wonder how old the wiring would have been in that place.
Hmm.
Because
Um, I don't know.
sometimes,
Go ahead.
go ahead.
Um, well, I heard that it was at least older than well, it was made in the 1800s, I believe. And it used to be like a school for boys at some point. Um, but I'm not sure about any deaths. But there was a
Hmm.
lot of older people that lived there, and I mean, every other week someone would end up dying from something.
Hmm. Well, what I was going to say is, um, a lot of times, if you don't have properly shielded electrical wires, and it
Mhm.
could be wires, it could be conduits, it could be outlets, what have you, they'll give off really high EMF,
Mhm.
and high EMF can actually give you the feeling of being watched, and
Uh
it can
huh.
give you a feeling of being uneasy. Um, so there's that, and I know like back I don't really want to know. I really don't know how long ago because I'm not an electrician, but I know that they used to not insulate wires the way they do nowadays.
Mhm.
Because like I've had to replace some wires at my house, and it's old. Um, but yeah, that's interesting. And then you have the people dying on top of that,
Yeah.
ever so often. I could definitely see, especially if it was like a school, I could definitely see either, maybe somebody from the past, maybe a music teacher, sort of a residual thing,
Uh huh.
playing the piano, or if it was a former resident, even,
Mhm.
possibly. So that's pretty cool. So how long did you live there?
I lived there about 4 years.
Okay.
Mhm.
So besides the piano, did you have any other kind of experiences or?
We would sometimes hear people running up and down the hallways.
Hmm.
Um, wouldn't see like would look out and not see anything. Um, and I've heard people saying that they heard footsteps in their apartments and just little things like that.
Okay. Do you remember what kind of building it was? Was it like brick
Yeah, it was brick.
or
It
okay?
had, on the bottom side, it looked almost like cement, but uh, on the first floor. But then the rest of it's brick.
Okay. All right. Cool. Have you ever been back to it just to like poke around or?
Yeah, I've went to visit a few times because I still have friends there.
Okay. Cool.
And I do really miss living there, but I just find it fascinating that everyone else had um, experiences too. You know,
Hmm.
it
You got
just
the validation, so it wasn't just you.
yeah, yeah. It was like that before I got there.
Hmm. Okay.
But yeah, I lived there for about 4 years, and after that, it, I was living with my grandma, and she had became ill and passed away. So the last few years, I'd been living with my aunt and uncle and cousins,
Hmm.
and they the house that we live in now. Um, it was a new neighborhood, and it's about 20 years old, I guess. So I've been here, visiting here and there. Um, but there's been always a lot of things happen in the whole neighborhood, and I was thinking, well, it can't be haunted because it was just built. But come to find out, it used to be where a Civil War hospital used to be,
Mm. Okay.
and
Yeah, people will think, oh well, it's the building that's haunted. Well, sometimes it's not. Sometimes it's the actual land that's
yeah,
haunted.
yeah, and we've had a lot of things happen in this house, and we've had a lot of our neighbors say the same thing. And my cousin had seen like a man in a Civil War outfit, and she described it to her neighbor, and she was like, "That's the exact same thing I saw the other day."
Hmm.
So there's that, validation. Um,
Hmm. So she
but
saw a figure. Did she like? Do you have a description or anything or?
she said he had like this coat on, and had like a coat and a hat on, and she didn't really just explain it too much.
Mm-hmm.
But,
You just saw something weird.
yeah.
Okay.
Um, but one of my cousins, when she was living here, she had her guitar strummed by itself, and that scared the crap out of her. She came running down the stairs, and my aunt was like, what's happening?" She's like, "My guitar was playing by itself." And she didn't stay in her room for um, a little while after that. Um, but there's always like sounds of furniture moving upstairs, and sometimes we'd see things out of the corner of our eyes. Um, but our neighbor had actually, he had a metal detector, and he was digging around his backyard, and he had found like a cannonball.
Nice.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I say that as a Revolutionary War reenactor. That's nice because in the Rev War, they didn't have explosive rounds. By the time you get to the Civil War, they do have explosive rounds.
Yeah. Um,
All right. Well, I tell you what's funny is so I was in North Carolina for a bit, and they actually have, and I have it now, a book
mm-hmm.
about North Carolina Civil War hospitals.
Yeah.
And when I came back to Georgia, I was looking for a book, thinking, this is a pretty specific topic. You would think that somebody would have done some research and compiled it into a book, but there's not one, at least not one that I could find
Mm-hmm.
here about the Civil War hospitals in Georgia. But I know there's, like with pretty much everywhere during the Civil War, there was a lot of death, a lot of mayhem,
Mm-hmm.
and the hospitals they weren't they weren't as effective as they are today, and some of the stuff that we take for granted today was kind of sussed out about that time.
Yeah.
Um, I'll tell you one thing that they did back then, which kind of set a trend, was tourniquets.
Mm-hmm.
Um, they would always say, don't put a tourniquet on there because if you put a tourniquet on, you're almost guaranteed to lose the limb, and
Yeah.
so that's a myth. That's not true at all, especially not nowadays when with all the technology that we have. Um, you know, because I went through medical training, and they're like, hey, if you can't stop that bleeding, slap a tourniquet on it. Write the time down, and you're golden. So long as we get them to the hospital within like 4 to 5 hours, it's not going to be a problem.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, Civil War medicine's interesting, and the fact that you like that site where your house is used to be a hospital, that's pretty interesting too. So that would tell me that either there was a farm there, which is very likely,
Mm-hmm.
or there was some kind of maybe a township or something right there.
Possible.
Because I mean, unless it's a farm, there's not going to be just buildings right there, kind of by itself.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and I don't know. I'm a big fan of history, so I went to a place called Bentonville Battleground, which
Mm-hmm.
is up in North Carolina, and it was like one of the largest wars fought in the South, and um, it was like the last big battle before the surrender at Appomattox. And they had a farmhouse there, a 2-story farmhouse, and that was used as a hospital.
Mm-hmm.
So um, one thing that I would be I'd be interested in. I mean, I don't know if they'd be able to actually locate anything, but if you could, I wonder. I mean, obviously they had to get a surveyor out there before they put everything, in the ground and whatnot. And
Yeah.
part of that probably included an archaeologist, an archaeological survey.
Mhm.
I'm curious now because, like, if they could map that place out, so like, yeah, the hospital was here and the corners were here. Sometimes, especially around battlefields, with a lot of casualties, they would make mass graves
Yeah.
because there's not really enough time to get them back to their home, let alone knowing who it is and where their home was.
Mhm.
There's there's no telling how many bodies are buried in the ground, within a few hundred feet of where you're living.
Yeah. And ever since I heard that there used to be a Civil War hospital here, I was very intrigued by it, and I'm still trying to learn more about it. Um, and but also kind of like, do I really want to um, dig into things? I don't
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
stir things up, but just over the hill, we have another neighborhood being uh, brought into development. So I guess maybe we'll hear if they find something there.
Mm-hmm. It's
Um,
possible. Well, it's possible that you hear something, and then it's also very possible that you might not. Because if it's a developer and who is kind of sensitive to that sort of deal, they
yeah.
might try to keep it on the down low.
Mhm.
Um, and on top of that, if they do find that the area is of some sort of historical significance, not to say that the state would step in or that the historical society would step in, but it could cause somebody to perk their ears up and be like, "Wait, hold on, stop construction. Let's figure out what this was." And
Yeah.
that's all that's going to do is cause them delays in construction and money. So.
Mhm. And there's also like some really big power lines that run through the side of the neighborhood, sort of separating
Hmm.
ours from the new one being developed.
Hmm.
And I've always heard about um, sometimes more activity happening where there's big power lines, and other times I've heard when that's not really been proven. But
Hmm.
I always wondered if that played a role as well.
Well, it is possible. It kind of depends on what theory you go by. If you go by the manifestation theory, basically, it's kind of the main theory that most people go by is that spirits have to draw energy from a source in order to manifest.
Hmm.
Um, I don't personally subscribe to that theory, at least not 100%, because in my worldview, these things are here with us.
Hmm.
Um, they're not really they're not locked in by time, more so that they might be locked in by location.
Yeah.
Um, but again, proof proof's a very big word. Causality is something that we strive to connect the dots for. But unfortunately, in parapsychology, cause and effect isn't really something we can test or measure. So we kind of have to go by correlation, and
Yeah.
correlation, as we all have probably heard, is equal causation.
Hmm.
Um, but I wouldn't say no outright, um, simply because obviously those power lines are giving off EMF, and if an entity did need extra juice, um, it's right there for them.
Yeah.
So that's pretty cool. So you've lived pretty much around weird things or had stuff happen to you at just about all the places you've lived, huh?
Yeah. But I think that this place has the most activity. Um,
Okay.
and well, we've had a lot of animals in this house. Even before I started living here, my aunt and them had a lot of animals here. Um,
Mhm.
because she's a cat lover, and we've had a couple of black cats before. Had a couple of black and white cats before. Um, and throughout the years, it just passed away. Um, but uh, I remember I was standing in the doorway of the upstairs bathroom, and I was talking to my cousin, and she was putting her makeup on. And so she was looking. I was looking at her, and she was looking in the mirror. And as I was talking to her, um, out of the corner of my eye, I saw like a black cat brush past my leg and go behind her into the other part of the bathroom. And I didn't at first. I didn't think much of it because we have cats. Um, but I was like, hold on just a minute. And I was like, did you see that cat just go by? She's like, yeah, I saw it through the mirror. And so I walked into the other part of the bathroom, and there's no cat.
Hmm. Okay. So, and I'll ask, but you might not know. I'm assuming that those pets are buried there on that property.
Yes.
Okay.
And sometimes we'd see like what we'd think is a cat, and we'd turn the corner and there wouldn't be a cat, sort of thing. We just always sort of felt like that was maybe some of the animals that had passed before.
Mhm.
Um, because I mean, my whole family believes in ghosts, and I guess because they've all sort of had their own experiences. Um,
Mhm.
but there was one time that was probably the biggest validation that I've ever had. Um, and I'm not really sure if it's of ghosts, but it was in the late evening, and uh, it was just me and my cousin at home, and my aunt was out grocery shopping, and we were standing in the dining room talking, and all of a sudden we hear a name be called. It sounded like it was coming from the garage, and she yelled back, "Yeah," and but there was no reply. And we thought maybe she was back from grocery shopping, but we didn't hear the garage door open. And it's very loud, so you'd be able to hear it. We both looked at each other, kind of scared, and we called my aunt to see where she was, and she says she was still at the grocery store. Um, and but it was in her voice, and we both heard it calling my cousin's name. Um, but I mean, I would go back and forth, believing and then not believing that there was, you know, other things other than just us here and now. Really
Mhm.
until that day. Um, and us seeing that cat together. Um, and I mean, some people say they'll hear their name be called when no one's calling it, and I've had that happen a lot before, and I always thought it was just me, or my 10-year-old explanation of it was like the house holds echoes and then just randomly releases them. But that was my 10-year-old explanation of it. But when
Mhm.
someone else hears it too, it just sort of really changed how I see things.
I
Um,
got you.
and I don't really know if ghosts are able to do that. But I've
Yeah.
heard things that can do that. Um, but yeah, and there was another night where I was coming home from one of the Bigfoot expeditions. Um, my cousin had called me and asked if I was home, and it was it was really late that evening. I was like, "No, I'm still driving. I won't be home for another like 45 minutes." And she said, "Cause I hear you coughing in your room, and it sounds like you."
Oh,
Yeah, and I think I had just gotten over a cold then. Um, and so it was just a little bit odd.
yeah. I would imagine so. That sounds like there's something maybe in the house that's um, I don't know, trying to copy one of you guys. That's
Yeah, I've had I've heard the word mimic be thrown around, but
Mhm.
I'm not gonna say for a fact if it is that or not. But
Yeah,
it's not just me that's experienced it; it's other people in the house as well.
right. Well, and a disembodied voice, you know, so when it comes to auditory stuff, you basically have two things. You have the EVP, or what some people call ITC,
Mhm.
instrumental transcommunication. So the EVP is electric voice phenomena, and that's basically where something says a word or two or a phrase or something, and it gets captured on some sort of storage medium,
Mhm.
and then a disembodied voice is a little different because you don't actually hear the EVP at the time of recording. You only hear it on playback.
Mhm.
Whereas with a disembodied voice, like that's real time, you hear it when it happens.
Yeah.
And what the source is of that sort of deal, I'm not really sure. But it's definitely interesting to to get a disembodied voice because they're not terribly common from what I understand.
Mhm.
I mean, with the EVP phenomena, you could say, well, the leading theory that I've heard is that the entity or whatever it is actually putting the message physically into the storage medium, so they're not actually making a sound.
Mhm.
But with a disembodied voice, it's different because either one of two things is happening. Either they're actually making a sound, right? Because so sound is they're mechanical waves. So something is vibrating the air molecules for then it to get make to your ear, and then your ear to decode the signal and be like, whoa, someone just said something.
Uh huh.
Or they're doing it in a way that it doesn't cause actual sound, but the person's hearing it.
Mhm.
Um, and obviously, if you have more than one person hearing it, then there must be a sound there for them to have heard.
Yeah.
So that
And yeah, and that's what I thought. Like before you could just um say, "Oh, you just heard it. It was in your head." But when two people hear the exact same thing, it's a little bit different.
hmm Have you ever thought about putting a recorder up, or maybe when you're out of the house or out of your room, or overnight or whatever?
Um, well, I've honestly been a little too afraid to do that. Because I don't really know if I'd want to know what's on it. You know what I mean? Because
hmm
I still have to come back and sleep here.
I guess. Yep. Okay. Well, I will tell you that um, one thing that I have been taught, and this is to me this is interesting, and it kind of proves the point that it's not actually a physical sound, or rather that EVPs aren't a physical sound,
Hmm.
is to to do an EVP session with a recorder that has the microphone disabled. So
Hmm.
basically, all you would have to do is go to like the Dollar Tree or somewhere and get a pair of crappy headphones,
Yeah.
and then cut them, and then plug that in. So the input will be taken, and the recorder will think that it's a microphone,
Uh huh.
and so it won't actually use its microphone. It'll be running off of whatever's plugged into the jack, And people have actually been able to get EVP recordings on recorders that had the microphone disabled.
Hmm.
And it's like, okay, so what was that?
Yeah.
Because it can't be making a sound. It couldn't record the sound because the microphone was disabled.
Mm-hmm.
Um, all right. So, and with your house being relatively new, I would imagine that it's probably. I mean, I would hope it'd be up to code since it's not terribly old. So we could probably say the EMF isn't going to cause hallucinations. It shouldn't be enough to do that in a
Mm-mm.
newer home. And
Yeah.
then I will say that, and I can't remember who this article was from. It might have been from Higgy Pop. Higgy Pop does a lot of very interesting articles, and they do paranormal stuff.
Mm-hmm.
They actually did a study, and there was a very high correlation between houses that people thought were haunted and
Mm-hmm.
mold. So
Hmm.
um, you might consider, and I'm not saying this to discount, the paranormal stuff, but you might
Mm-hmm.
want to consider getting a mold test, just to kind of be on the safe side.
Mm-hmm.
Um,
Well, I'll definitely
but that's
mention
definitely okay. Yeah.
we
If
haven't really
what?
had any problems with it, but it is,
Hmm.
as it ages, it's definitely something to look out for.
Yeah. And then I don't know where exactly you are in Georgia, but I know in some places, they have gases seep up from the ground, so like radon and stuff. Like if you go
Mm-hmm.
up north, some of their basements are sealed because of gases that come through, and
Mm.
they can sometimes cause hallucinations.
Mm-hmm.
Um, but yeah, and and again, I'm saying that just kind of cover bases, not so much to rule out that your experiences as being real or not.
Yeah, yeah. Um, I mean, I'm always for like another explanation. Um, it's just like with certain things that have happened, um, especially in other places as well. I just
Hmm.
believe that ghosts are a possibility. Um, not to say that everything is a ghost.
Hmm. Hmm.
Um,
I actually did investigate a Civil War site. Well, they call it a Civil War site. I don't think any Civil War actually happened there, but
mhm,
it was a plantation during the 1800s, and they put on a fairly decent Christmas program where they do have a Civil War reenactment, or not a reenactment, but a program. Guys come out with their cannons and whatnot, and they do demonstrations.
mhm,
And I did an investigation at the house, and it was about the deadest place I had ever been. And we were like, huh, well, let's see if we can, get some activity. And so one person sang Dixie, and then someone else was like, no, 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 you don't sing Dixie. Sing Battle Hymn of the Republic. That'll get them mad.
mhm,
And well, here. We are in this dark house, just singing an old, a march from the 1800s
mhm,
in the dark. Like it's kind of comical, I guess. We never caught anything at that house. Not like nothing. No breezes, no smells, no odd feelings.
mhm.
It was just it was completely dead. Although if I'm not mistaken, this has been, gosh, it's probably been like a decade and a half ago. I think one of the descendants did die in that house, but if she did, she had moved on. She wasn't there to talk to us, or to
Mhm.
respond to us that night.
Yeah.
All right.
That seems
Well,
like it's pretty
hmm?
That seems like it'd be pretty fun.
Yeah, and I kind of get it in a way that people are like, oh, we'll do the ghost tourism thing and we'll do ghost tours, and there's some tours you can take now where they actually have equipment and you can kind of do your own little mini investigation. And I did one in Gatlinburg and it was kind of fun, uh, but there was there was one spot where the tour guide was like, "Oh yeah, yeah, you're gonna get a ton of EMF over here, and we have no idea where it's coming from."
Mm-hmm.
We've had people say, "Well, it's got to be buried wires," but then like we've spoken with professionals who are like, "No, the wires should be buried way deeper than that. Either we shouldn't be picking up a wire."
Yeah.
But I could tell you what it was. There are wires, and it's probably something in the street because I was able to follow the EMF down the side of the road to a water main. So
Mm-hmm.
there's utilities there. Not I'm not going to say who it was because it was still an interesting walk.
Yeah.
But always look for the easiest, the simplest, most plausible explanation. And I don't think anybody even bothered to follow where I was going because I was like, I don't know, I'd probably walked away like 50 feet to find this water main, but I just
Mm-hmm.
followed the signal.
Hmm. And
So, mhm,
often thought it'd be pretty interesting to get like an EMF reader or one of the radioactive like detectors, radiation
mhm.
detector, and
Mhm.
kind of walk around and see if I could see anything, figure out anything. I don't know.
Yeah. Well, and it wouldn't hurt. I will say that if you want to get something, you can. There's a couple of reasonably priced things that you can find. So K2 meters, they're a little black box, and they have lights that lights up. Um, K2 meters are really sensitive. In fact, sometimes I think they're too sensitive. My
Mm-hmm.
phone, like I have to put my phone on do not disturb because if I get a notification on my phone, it'll make it spike.
Hmm.
So just kind of be wary of that. That was one thing, a meme that always comes around every so often on Facebook is, you got it's like a cartoon of these ghost hunters standing around looking at the EMF meter, like, oh my gosh, there's so much EMF here and there's no power. And then like the next panel is kind of zoomed out and you have all these people with, cameras and microphones and electronics that are, obviously giving off EMF.
Yeah.
Um, and and it's actually like you can measure it from like you don't have to be right up on top of it. I can't remember what the manual for the Army says, but the land nav field manual, it actually will tell you you can't, like, you need to be X amount of feet away from this object or that object because it'll throw off the compass.
Mm-hmm.
Even your gun has enough metal that will actually throw the compass off.
Hmm.
So if you wanted the cheapest way to do it, I would get a compass.
Yeah.
Compass because they're like a buck or less from the Dollar Tree.
Yeah.
Uh, the K2 meters are usually pretty cheap. I think they're in like the $20 range. There's I think it's called a ghost meter. It's like
Mm-hmm.
this clear plastic thing, and it has a gauge, and at the top it has a light, and it'll light up and it'll beep. It runs on like a 9-volt battery. I used to have a handful of those back in the day. They're about $20, and you can get these off Amazon.
Yeah.
I think the Ghost. I think it's called theghoststore.com. Also sells them. Um, and then as far as like a Geiger counter,
Mm-hmm.
I wouldn't bother with a Geiger counter because like they could get real expensive.
Yeah.
Um, but I mean, if you want to take it to the next level, I mean, some paranormal organizations do carry a Geiger counter. Um, I don't know if anyone's ever got any hits on it with paranormal phenomena, I know that Hellbent Holler, I think, ever so often will pick up radiation, like when they're out in the middle of nowhere in the woods, and they're like, "What is going on?"
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I would start out. If you want to start out cheap, I would definitely do a compass. And there's also you can give apps on your phone. Like there's a SLS camera app that
Mhm.
you can find. There's a free version and there's paid versions for it. I don't know. I don't know how much stock to put in the SLS apps. Like if you have an actual device that's designed to do that, that's one thing. But if it's an app on your phone, I don't really know the technical specifications for it. But if you've ever seen a picture and it's got like a stick figure with
Mhm.
little dots on it, that's SLS. And
Mhm.
basically, it's a photo sensor sort of deal that is supposed to pick up human shaped objects.
Yeah.
Um, thus the stick figure. But from my own experimentation, it will track light as well. Like
Mhm.
I've had it superimpose on tombstones. I've had it superimpose on trees, and it's like, okay, don't think there's a spirit in that tree, but there is an oddly, shaped spot of light right there. So maybe it's picking up on that.
Yeah.
But of course, I have that. I do have that app on my phone. I have the paid version, and you can take pictures and you can record with it. So that's kind of cool.
Mhm.
Um, if you really want to get into it, like a decent audio recorder will go a long way. And they have thermal cameras that you can plug into your phone. And they're relatively inexpensive. They have ones that will plug into your phone. I have one of those because I have, I know I can record on it. And they do also sell small handheld ones.
Mhm.
They're, in the $200 to $300 range.
Yeah.
Um, I had a guy, I knew a guy up in North Carolina, runs a cryptozoology museum that was out hunting for Bigfoot one night and captured what he believes, and to me, it looks like a soldier um, standing there, and you can see that he has the kepi, the Civil War style hat on, and he's
Mhm.
got his knapsack on, and it's basically the outline of a Civil War soldier uh, on his thermal. It's just
Wow.
weird, He's out there looking for Bigfoot, and here he captures what he believes to be the ghost of a Civil War soldier.
Mhm.
Um, so
You can.
there's all sorts of ways, all kind of tools and toys out there you can use.
Yeah. And I've been wanting to get one of the thermals that you can plug into your phone
Hmm.
because I mean, people that I go Bigfooting with run around with the thermals and FLIRs, and one of them had one that connected to your phone, and that looked really cool. That's
Hmm.
definitely on the list to get for um, both Bigfoot and ghost hunting. So
I got you. Yep. And I'll tell you one thing is that technology has become more accessible and less expensive. When I first started, getting into the paranormal and whatnot, the technology was a lot more expensive. Granted, there's still things that are ridiculously expensive, and that's probably because they know people will pay it. But as far
mm,
as like cameras and voice recorders and that sort of stuff, you can find that stuff relatively cheap.
yeah.
I will say though that finding an actual voice recorder like in a brick and mortar store is kind of hard because like the only place that I know that carried them,
Hmm.
like I know that uh, what's that place called? Best Buy. Best Buy carries them, but I used to get mine from Radio Shack, and Radio Shack, I don't know how old you are, if you even remember Radio Shack, but Radio Shack's not around anymore.
I vaguely remember it.
Um, yeah, they had. or at least the one that was near me had a whole assortment of
Mhm.
different ones. There was actually one that was pretty cool. It had a little button you could push, and then the male USB connector would pop out of the top, so you didn't have to worry about a cord. It was built into the actual recorder.
Mhm.
Well, well
Um.
go ahead.
I was just gonna mention a couple things that my aunt had experienced.
Go for it.
Um. Well, she's had quite a few experiences in this house too. Um. Like one evening she was home alone. Um. And it had already gotten dark, and she says she started hearing banging at the basement door. Um. And so she pulled a chair up under the doorknob, and then she started hearing footsteps running upstairs, and she thought that someone broke in the house. And she ended up having to get our neighbor to come in and go through the house with a gun, and they didn't find anything. Um, but sometimes, like when my cousins were younger and they'd go to school, she would be home alone, and um, she said that she would hear furniture moving upstairs, and that's happened multiple times, where someone would hear furniture moving from upstairs. Um, and just recently, my aunt and uncle were sitting at the table having dinner, and I was out of the house, but they had heard furniture moving upstairs, and that's what it sounded like. And my aunt was sort of happy because my uncle finally heard it after all this time, because he's hardly ever at the house. And she was like, "This is what I've been talking about this whole time." Um, but and then her and my cousin was sitting at the table, and they had like a big plant over in the corner of the dining room, and they both saw that it looked like as if something sort of brushed past the plant, like it just moved all of a sudden. The air wasn't on or anything, and the it just, I don't know, it just moved like something brushed past it, and they both looked at each other like, "Did you just see that?" And back in December, I came downstairs for something, and the kitchen lights were flickering, and there's about, I guess there's like three bulbs in there, and I thought maybe one of them was going out. Uh, and I was going to mention it to someone and say, "Hey, probably need to check the lights or change the bulbs or something." And I forgot till about a month later, and I ended up asking my aunt if they ever had to change the replace the lights, and she said, "No, there's nothing wrong with the lights." But yeah, I actually did get that one on video, whether it was something electrical or something else. But it was flickering for a little bit, and then it stopped.
Hmm.
Um, and we had just gotten neighbors, new neighbors, and they had this little girl, and she had looked like she made friends with the kids down the road. And I was sitting on the front porch one afternoon, and her friend comes running down the driveway screaming. And I was like, "What is it? What's wrong?" And she's like, "Her house is haunted. We're going back to my other friend's house." And I told him, "Well, it's probably haunted too."
Mm-hmm.
And it was a little bit funny, but it's, not just our house, it's the whole neighborhood, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Well, if the kind of the I don't want to say standard operating procedure because there really wasn't one um, until closer to the end of the war.
Mhm.
But typically, the field hospitals were usually within a couple of miles of where the main battle was expected to be.
Uh huh.
So, it's
Well,
very possible that you might be near a battlefield.
well, the I'm there. I'm sure there's probably graves around here that I'm just not aware of, but I do know of
Hmm.
one grave, like a big it's like really old. I don't know if it's from the Civil War. Um I'd only been up there once and it was to find geocaches if you know what that is.
Hmm.
Um but it is a really old cemetery and it's just right down the road. It could be related to the Civil War hospital or during that time period. Um I'm not sure, but it's a possibility.
Yeah, absolutely. And then and if there was a farm there too, a lot of times um, they would have their family buried there on the property, and so there would be a there might very well be a family cemetery out there as well.
Mhm.
So it's definitely intriguing. Like I would be very interested in trying to dig up some history, um, about the area because I mean that seems like a lot of activity and that it's dispersed over several houses. Because
Yeah.
clearly something's there.
Yes, something's going on. Don't know if
And
it's
it
ghosts or what.
yeah.
Sure there's ghosts here from that time period because people have said they've seen them. Um
Hmm.
but some of the other things, um I don't know if it's something more if it was something more of a darker energy, I could see that, but since there was a lot of death, um not gonna really say for certain if
Hmm.
there is, but it's a possibility. Um,
Yeah.
it's not just ghosts, but yeah, I don't really know how much I want to get into it though.
Hmm.
It's very interesting to me, but I don't really know a whole lot about it to feel safe enough to do a deep dive into it. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And I remember watching Hellbent Holler one time, and she was talking about how they uh was trying to like um bait whatever was in the woods, and so she stood out there in the middle of a field by herself, and she had turned around and seen red eyes and stuff, and she felt like that was a little bit too dangerous or reckless, and was talking about how um the like to be vulnerable enough to experience something, but also not so vulnerable that you're not protecting yourself.
Hmm.
Um, and yeah, I just found that really um, interesting. And I mean, it makes sense. You definitely don't want to mess around with something you don't know and not be protected in some way.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Yeah, I remember that episode. And I know they bring it up every so often. It's like, yeah, we're not doing that again.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah. And to the listeners, if you've never heard of these folks, um, Hellbent Holler is a really great podcast. They do a lot of stuff, a lot of experimental things. So definitely give them a look and a shout out and subscribe to their stuff because they do all kinds of stuff. I wish that I had the time and motivation to do half the stuff that they do.
Yeah.
because they are just like out in the woods all the daggum time,
Mhm.
and they actually live um, up in western North Carolina. Like where I was, they lived about 4 hours away from where I stayed,
Yeah.
and they've done some investigation in the Uwharrie National Forest, which is kind of cool because I've done camping out there, and the Uwharrie is a pretty cool place. If you ever get a chance to go up there,
Yeah.
but definitely you do want to be safe, um, and especially when you're dealing with something you can't see, and depending on what it is, there's no telling what it could or could not or might be able to do. So,
Yeah. They had also did um trips up to North Georgia, um,
oh yeah,
where I'm from, and they had found a lot of like ritualistic things happening in the woods, and
oh yeah.
I can just say that probably that is very well true because there's a lot of stuff like that that I've heard happens up here in the North Georgia mountains as well. Um,
Hmm.
my grandmother, she used to be a cop, and she, yeah, she would tell us of things that would happen up there, and that's why she didn't want us going up into the mountains, into the woods. Um, but yeah, I definitely, um, when I heard that, I'm like, yep, someone else knows about it. you know,
Yeah,
like it's not
yeah.
just us. People go up
There,
there and they find things they don't want to find.
yep, that's definitely true. Most people, they go out into the woods and like the worst thing they expect to find, they might walk up on an animal when in actuality the worst thing that they might find is walking up on a person that you know, they don't want to be found.
Uh huh. Yep. And I had a friend whose boyfriend had a run in with people up in the mountains, not too far from here, that did stuff like that, and they ended up chasing them off the mountain, and they were really afraid.
Mm-hmm.
But it was a group of guys, and they ended up uh, chasing them with their cars down the mountain.
Hmm.
So you got to be
You know, it's
careful with meat.
yep. It's funny because I I got this memory. A friend told me this, and I like when he first told me it was, gosh, this is probably back in middle school. I just kind of wrote it off. He was making up a story or whatever.
Mhm.
But now getting into this sort of thing, like it might be legit. He told me that he was somewhere, I can't remember where it was, on St. Simon's Island, which that's the county. I live in Glenn County. St. Simon's Island is where all the rich people live.
Mhm.
Um, and he basically said that he walked up into this area and there were several people who were in like black robes, and that this guy just kind of like teleported from where he was standing however many feet away to being basically right up in this guy's face, my friend's face, that is.
Mhm.
And I'm like, oh, come on, he probably just ran, because like you can cover 21 feet is like the there's a name for it, but in law enforcement, 21 feet is like the distance you need to be wary of because people can cross that in like just a couple of steps.
Yeah.
Um, and I was like, he probably just ran up to you. He's like, nah, dude, he was like standing still and went from being over there to being like right in front of me. And, again, I just, early teens, I just kind of wrote it off like, you're full of it.
Mhm.
But, nowadays I'm like, maybe there is something going on over there. I don't know. Rich people can be into some strange stuff,
Mhm.
but
Never know.
then so can the mountain folk too.
Yep.
There's it's on Amazon Prime, and I'm pretty sure it's on YouTube as well for free. Um, the Newkirks, who have a oddities and paranormal museum, they did a documentary. Well, it's not a documentary. It's a docu series
Mhm.
called Hellier. Really good, and it kind of delves into uh, it teases the idea that there are people out there doing occultic things out in the mountains of um, gosh, where were they? They were in either Tennessee or Kentucky.
Mhm.
So if you got some time, the first season is kind of a slow burn, but the second season it really gets interesting because they're out there and they're looking for ghost stuff, and Bigfoot stuff starts happening, and then they start looking for Bigfoot stuff, and then UFO stuff starts happening,
Mhm.
and it's so high strangeness is
Yeah.
the word to describe it.
Yeah. And I always wanted to hike the Appalachian Trail ever since I was younger. I always wanted to do it. But
Hmm.
um after going, Bigfoot hunting and knowing that these type of people are in the woods now, um and just being out there as well, I it don't know if I will or not. um I definitely am not going to do it alone. um
Yeah,
at one point I thought, yeah, I'm just going to hike the Appalachian Trail alone. No, not anymore. Not anymore.
yeah. Actually, I had a colleague of mine who did at least a part of it. She and a couple of her friends went, and she had one of those disposable cameras that you have to go and you get the film developed.
Mhm.
And they got it developed, and one of the photos came back, and it was of them in their tent asleep, all three of them.
Mhm.
So
That's weird.
who took the picture? you
Mhm.
know, someone had went into their tent, went into a bag, got the camera, wound it up, must have had the flash on for them to be able to tell what they were looking at, put it away, and then left and zipped the tent back up with them, all three of them asleep, and
Mhm.
didn't know until they had gotten the film developed. That's so
That would be
creepy that
scary.
people would do that.
Yeah, I wouldn't go back to that spot if that had happened.
Yeah, I'd kind of like to hike at least some of it, but
Yeah, I mean, it's really pretty in the day, and if you've got a lot of
mhm.
people with you, sure. Um, but like when the night comes, it can uh turn out to be a different story real fast.
Mhm.
And, there's always videos on YouTube about people's experiences in the Appalachian Mountains, and you know, most of them, I was like, did this really happen or did it not? But now, I mean, you never know.
Mhm. Well, the Appalachian Mountains are some of the oldest mountains, if not the oldest mountains on the planet. Like, if you believe in an old Earth, which I know probably most people do, the Appalachian Mountains are actually older than the Atlantic Ocean itself.
Hmm.
So they're they're old, and the Atlantic Ocean's like, I think it's like 200 million years old is the estimate for when the continent basically split to create the ocean.
Mm-hmm.
So they're old, and that's one of the reasons why they're not pointy and tall. Like the Rockies, because the Rockies are really young. They still have their points to them, whereas the Appalachians, they're shorter and they're rounded off.
Yeah.
So I think they are the oldest existing mountain range, because there are some mountain ranges that don't exist anymore that only have like one or two hills, like Medoc Mountain up in North Carolina, and the Uaris for that matter. Those used to be part of an ancient mountain chain that are just, they're so old they've been worn down, so you can't tell that they were mountains.
Mhm.
But yeah, it is interesting, most definitely, and I'd love to have you back on. I know we've been going, probably went a little bit longer than you were expecting, but I do appreciate you coming on and telling me your stories. And if you have other experiences or other stories, I definitely would love to hear them.
Okay. Well, thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, yeah, I'll reach out to you on Facebook Messenger,
Mhm.
and to anybody in the audience, if y'all have stories or experiences that you would like to come on and pass them along, definitely have some openings. If you want to come be a guest on the podcast as well, and we will plug all of our social media and our particulars here at the end. And Haley, again, thank you very much for coming on. I hope you have a great rest of your day, and I hope that with all the stuff going on in your house and your neighborhood, I hope you stay safe, and we'll be in touch.
Okay. Well, have a good day.
You too.